Hello, I'm Eric. I reside in a quaint little town named Millbrook, situated roughly 40 minutes from Albany, New York. It's a spot where familiarity reigns, and life unfolds at a more leisurely rhythm. The tranquility here is delightful, and to be honest, it's just how I prefer it. At 32, it seems like life is unfolding in a way that feels almost automatic. Life continues to unfold, regardless of our preparedness for it. I've been living here in Millbrook for a year now. I purchased my own home. It's not a grand estate or anything extravagant, just a simple 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home, but it's my own. I dedicated a significant amount of time to saving for it, putting in extra hours, foregoing vacations, and making every effort to cut back on expenses. After years of moving from one rented apartment to another, I longed for stability, a place that truly felt like home. It was clear to me that the time had come to establish some roots. Yet, if I'm truthful, my life doesn't seem to have aligned in the manner I envisioned. I have the house and a decent job, yet I've never tied the knot. Without children or a family of my own. Not that I'm voicing any discontent, but it seems that in the midst of my busy schedule and the hustle of daily life, I may have overlooked the idea of truly settling down. I am employed at a nearby marketing agency in the area. It's a modest operation, just a handful of us, yet it keeps the lights on. The pace is consistent, nothing particularly thrilling, yet I have no grievances. On most days, I find myself at my desk, gazing at a screen, crafting emails, or managing social media initiatives. It's the sort of role that doesn't demand too much energy, yet offers little in return. I don't mind it, yet there are moments when I ponder if I'm merely passing the hours. Throughout my journey, the unwavering presence has been my mom. Christina has always been a constant presence in my life. I have no recollection of my father. He passed away in a plane crash during my childhood. I believe I was just 5 when it occurred, and the recollections I hold of him are so hazy now that I can hardly picture his face. For as long as I can recall, it was only my mother and me. She embodies strength, radiating positivity, and unwavering support. She chose not to enter into another marriage after my dad's passing. It seems she dedicated herself to my upbringing, and perhaps that's the reason I never truly sought out my own relationships. I believe I've always sensed that having my mom was sufficient for me. I'm not sure if that's the best approach, but it is how everything unfolded. Each weekend, I make my way to her place. It's merely a 10-minute drive from my place, yet it's a routine I've come to embrace. Sometimes, I'm uncertain about our plans, but we consistently find ways to enjoy each other's company, whether it's sharing a film or simply reconnecting. She is truly my closest companion. At times, I ponder whether I've relied on her excessively, yet she always appears unfazed. Honestly, I've reached a point of acceptance with my single status. Eventually, I ceased my search for companionship. I made attempts, but it seems I wasn't particularly skilled in the realm of dating. It often felt like a considerable amount of effort for minimal reward. Perhaps that may come off as jaded, but following several unsuccessful relationships, I chose to redirect my attention elsewhere. Honestly, I find solace in solitude. Perhaps it's not the most beneficial choice, yet it brings a sense of comfort that I recognize. Yet, there are moments when I find myself pondering if there's something more. I possess everything I believed I would require. A lovely home, a reliable career, a supportive family, yet as I observe others my age, many have started their own families, have children, or are in committed relationships, and I can't help but question if I've overlooked something significant. However, that is the current state of affairs. I'm navigating through life day by day, keeping my focus on the present and not stressing over what lies ahead. There's no hurry, is there? There's no rush to understand everything right away. So, that's my current situation. Life is quite straightforward, to be honest. It may not be as thrilling as I once imagined at this stage of life, yet it belongs to me, and for the moment, I find contentment in that. Allow me to share how everything transformed. A seemingly straightforward task, such as delivering a package for my mom, spiraled into a whirlwind of unexpected chaos. One weekend, as is my custom, I chose to pay a visit to my mom. It's turned into somewhat of a routine for me. I'm not sure, but it simply resonates with me. Each weekend, I take the brief journey to her home. It's merely a short 10-minute journey from my place, yet it's become a delightful ritual that I truly savor. Being around her brings a sense of comfort, even in the absence of any extraordinary activities. That morning, I decided to enhance the visit with a touch of thoughtfulness. My mother often advises me against splurging on her, yet I can sense her delight in those small, unexpected gifts. I visited the nearby grocery store and gathered a selection of her favorite items. Fruits, pastries, items she consistently advises me against spending money on. I understand it might seem trivial, but I've always enjoyed pampering her a little, even when she claims it's unnecessary. Upon my arrival, she occupied her familiar place at the kitchen table, gazing up at me with that ever-warm smile she has always worn. I specifically asked you not to buy all of this, Eric, she said, shaking her head as she glanced at the bag I brought. Yet, it was evident that she was filled with joy. My mom tends to be that way. She never requests anything, yet she always shows gratitude when I take actions like this. It's somewhat of a signature for us, and I believe that's the reason I engage in it. We settled in, enjoyed some tea, and engaged in conversation for a bit. She prepared a delightful stew, a dish I haven't enjoyed in quite some time. I could never turn it down. The meal was comforting, and the dialogue flowed effortlessly, just as it always does when we share each other's company. I was completely unaware of how much time had slipped away until she glanced at the clock and then turned to me, her expression slightly more solemn than normal. Eric, she remarked, there's a little request I have for you. I glanced at her, my mind wandering elsewhere. My mother rarely requests anything, so when she does, I am always eager to assist. Of course, what do you need? Could you drop off a package for me? She asked, her tone relaxed, as if it were just a simple task. This is intended for Megan. I acknowledged with a nod. I was well aware of whom she was referring to. Megan wasn't a friend from way back like many of my mom's acquaintances. She was somewhat fresh to the scene. She began collaborating with my mom some time back. Based on my understanding, Megan was a co-worker. Though not a long-time acquaintance of my mother, they formed a connection in no time. It was clear to understand the reasons behind it. Megan was, quite frankly, one of those women who appeared to have it all figured out. She appeared to be in her early 50s, but she seemed much younger than her actual age. The vibrancy she exuded, her captivating appearance, the grace with which she moved through the world. She was one of those individuals who embraced the passage of time with elegance. If I were to make an observation, I might suggest she appears to be nearer to 40 than 50. I had encountered her on several occasions during my visits to my mother. She would visit for lunch or simply to spend time together, and each occasion, she made a lasting impression. Megan had a unique ability to put others at ease from the moment you met her. She was approachable, remarkably warm, and possessed a genuine kindness that made you feel truly valued. Mom often remarked on Megan's sweetness, highlighting what a genuinely good person she was. I had come across the news of her divorce, how Megan had once been married, only to find that her husband had been unfaithful. It seemed to have affected her deeply, and as far as I was aware, she had remained unattached since then. That's one of the reasons I held her in such high regard. She remained open and unresentful, regardless of her past experiences. It gave her an air of strength, subtle yet undeniable. I consented to deliver the package. I didn't give it much thought, it was merely a minor task for my mom. I'll head out immediately, I declared, snatching my jacket. Where does she reside? My mother provided me with the address. It was merely a brief drive from her home. The contents of the package were a mystery to me, yet it held no significance. It was not my concern. Upon reaching Megan's abode, I rapped gently on the door, and she greeted me with a radiant smile. "Oh, Eric, I truly appreciate you bringing this," she expressed. Her voice carried a delightful, inviting quality, making it impossible for me not to feel comfortable in her presence. We exchanged a few words as I passed her the package, and before I realized it, she welcomed me in. I had no intention of lingering, yet she urged me to stay, claiming she had a few delightful treats to share over tea. Initially, I felt a twinge of uncertainty, yet her warmth and authenticity drew me in. To be truthful, the thought of lingering a bit longer didn't bother me at all. Upon entering, Megan guided me to her kitchen. She preferred a more understated approach to her home. All was straightforward, tidy, and cozy. It was clear that she found satisfaction in the simple things, rather than in anything lavish. We gathered around the table, and as our conversation flowed, she began to prepare tea. She exuded a serene quality, a natural comfort that invited conversation effortlessly. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly between us. She inquired about my life and my job, and I realized I was sharing more than I typically do. Her attentive gaze remained fixed on me as I shared my thoughts, creating an atmosphere that felt truly engaging and sincere. I truly valued that experience. Megan was not only kind, she was also deeply considerate. It was evident that she had faced numerous challenges, yet she carried them with grace. She donned it as a symbol of resilience, and I found that truly admirable in her. Our conversation stretched on for more than an hour, and when I finally glanced at the clock, I was astonished by how swiftly the time had flown by. It had transformed into something more than a mere brief pause. Our connection unfolded in a manner that took me by surprise. At that moment, uncertainty clouded my thoughts, yet as I departed, an undeniable warmth began to blossom within me. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that seemingly straightforward delivery marked the onset of a far more intricate journey. 7 days went by. It felt like it vanished in an instant, much like the weeks often do when you're immersed in the hustle of everyday existence. Yet that week, an unusual sensation lingered in the air. I suppose I've been reflecting quite a bit on my mom recently, considering how much time I truly have left with her. Time was not on her side, and while her spirit remained vibrant, it was clear she had crossed the threshold of 50. Time was closing in. I realized more than ever that I had to prioritize my time with her, regardless of the chaos surrounding me. She was the last family member I truly had, and I felt uncertain about how much longer I'd be able to visit her as frequently as I desired. Uncertain of the reason behind my urgency, I resolved that morning to take action. I intended to pay her another visit. There are no justifications. I found myself with some time on my hands, and I was eager to utilize it fully. I visited my usual grocery store and grabbed a few items for her. Just a small indulgence, nothing too extravagant. She always cherished the moments when I surprised her with small gifts. Upon my arrival at her house, I noticed it had an unusual air about it. As I drove into the driveway, I realized her car wasn't the sole vehicle present. Megan's car sat parked outside, and for a brief moment, I found myself hesitating. To my surprise, she appeared before me again, sooner than I had anticipated. I brushed the thought away and approached the door with determination. "Hello, Mom. It's your child," I shouted as I swung the door open. She was perched at the kitchen table, engaged in conversation with Megan. As I entered, their gazes lifted, and Megan greeted me with a warm smile. It was that same smile from the other day, the sort that appeared to infuse everything with a touch more warmth. Our gazes met briefly, and inexplicably, I sensed that she was attempting to convey a message to me. There was an unspoken connection between us, a subtle recognition that lingered in the air, felt rather than articulated. I returned the smile, feeling a bit at a loss for words. This time, there was an unmistakable shift, as if we both sensed an undercurrent beyond mere casual interaction, yet I couldn't quite identify it. "Eric, you've arrived," my mom exclaimed, her tone as cheerful and inviting as ever. "You've arrived perfectly for dinner. Your favorite has been prepared." She rose to embrace me, and I reciprocated the embrace, just as I always had. "So, how's everything unfolding, dear?" she inquired, her voice relaxed yet tinged with worry. She constantly fretted over my well-being, despite the fact that I was already in my late 20s. "I'm fine, Mom," I answered. "Occupied, as you might expect, yet quite well." We gathered around the table. The dish was uncomplicated, yet it was precisely what I craved. Comfort food, the type of nourishment that assures you that all will be well, regardless of the chaos surrounding you. While we enjoyed our meal, the chatter was casual, but soon enough, my mom changed the tone. She glanced my way, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "So, Eric," she began, "have you encountered anyone new recently? It seems that time is passing by. Time waits for no one. I hope to have some grandkids soon so I can fully relish the joy they bring before time slips away." I nearly found myself in a choking situation with my meal. I had certainly contemplated it prior. Honestly, I had, but hearing it spoken, particularly from my mom, transformed it into a completely different dialogue. She had a knack for being discreet in situations like this, yet today, the purpose behind her words was unmistakable. She was alluding to something. I cast a quick look at Megan. She gazed at me as well, her eyes gentle, yet tinged with a hint of intrigue. She had that knowing look, as if she understood precisely what my mom was hinting at, and for some reason, I sensed that she might even be part of it. Megan's gaze held a certain depth, a hint that perhaps she was privy to secrets of my life that I had never shared with her. We shared a fleeting look, and in that instant, I sensed a spark of connection between us. It felt like we were in perfect harmony, yet neither of us was prepared to move forward just yet. Mom, catching the quiet moment between us, laughed softly and shot us a playful glance. "It appears that you both are in on something intriguing. What's happening here?" I attempted to maintain my composure, careful not to disclose any details. "Nothing, Mom, honestly, just chatting," but I could sense she wasn't convinced. She reclined in her chair, observing the two of us for a brief moment before redirecting her attention to me. "Perhaps it's worth considering, Eric. I really hope I'm not the only one here without grandkids. It's evident that your mother is aging." The atmosphere was thick with tension, yet Megan shattered it with her words, her tone airy and almost whimsical. "No need to fret, Eric," she said, her smile warm and reassuring. "There's still ample time ahead of you. There's no urgency to make any decisions." Her tone was relaxed, yet I found myself questioning whether there was more lurking beneath the surface of her words. Megan's smile was gentle, yet it held a subtle undertone that eluded my understanding. Was she merely attempting to alleviate the strain, or was there a deeper meaning behind her words? A warm flush crept across my cheeks, leaving me uncertain of how to reply. Their gazes were heavy, each carrying its own weight, Mom's laced with her familiar worry, while Megan's held a subtle, understanding grin. It felt as though I was being nudged toward a discussion I wasn't prepared to have. The evening unfolded in much the same way, with my mother subtly weaving in thoughts about my future and the notion of settling down, while Megan sat quietly, her gaze lingering a touch more than necessary. I was unsure whether her demeanor was merely a display of courtesy or if she truly cared about the connection we were forming. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, an unshakable presence that lingered in the air. As dinner drew to a close, the atmosphere felt heavy, as if an unspoken tension lingered between us. It was clear that both of them sensed it, yet neither seemed ready to confront the underlying truth. As dinner came to a close, I sensed my mom had something brewing beneath the surface. She wore that familiar glint in her eyes, the kind that signaled she was on the verge of proposing something I was certain I wouldn't be able to resist. As I assisted in clearing the plates, she nonchalantly glanced my way and remarked, "Eric, why not offer Megan a ride home? It's along your route, and I'd appreciate knowing she arrives home safely." I caught a glimpse of Megan, who offered me a subtle, nearly bashful smile. The idea had its merits. I found myself without any plans for the evening, and there was no urgency to head off to any destination. "Absolutely," I replied without a moment's pause. "Absolutely fine." Megan expressed her gratitude, and after exchanging farewells with my mom, we ventured outside into the refreshing night air. The stillness enveloped the neighborhood, a serene hush that descended with the night. As we settled into my car, it struck me that this was the first moment I had truly been alone with Megan. The journey began in a soothing hush. Megan appeared lost in contemplation, her fingers absent-mindedly drawing shapes on the material of her coat. After a brief pause, she finally found her voice. You know, she said, her voice softer than usual. It has been ages since I experienced a night like this. An uncomplicated meal, pleasant companionship, it was a delightful experience. I looked at her, noticing the glimmer of the passing streetlights mirrored in her gaze. Indeed, this isn't something you engage in frequently. She released a soft chuckle, gently shaking her head. Not quite. It has been quite a while since I allowed myself to take pleasure in experiences like this. Her tone held a certain intrigue that piqued my curiosity. I refrained from pushing her, yet after a brief silence, she continued as though there was something weighing on her mind that she needed to express. She confessed that she had been married once. Once upon a time. The conclusion was far from favorable. I remained silent, allowing her to express herself freely. At times, individuals simply require a compassionate ear. He was not a good man, she went on. Initially, I believed he was the embodiment of all my desires. It's a familiar experience from our youth. You hold on to love as if it were a whimsical storybook dream. I believed he had feelings for me as well, but I was mistaken. Her voice resonated with a depth, as if she bore the burden of countless years of sorrow in those few uttered phrases. He exhibited a strong sense of control. Chilly. He never truly recognized my humanity, merely viewing me as an object to possess. And when he finally departed, I believed it would shatter me. She let out a humorless chuckle, devoid of any amusement. It's amusing to realize that my feelings for him might have surpassed his for me. And that was the most challenging moment, coming to terms with the fact that I poured my heart into someone who never truly valued it. I found myself at a loss for words. How does one even respond to something like that? Excuse me? It seemed insufficient, lacking substance. Instead, I expressed my genuine feelings. That seems quite challenging, Megan. Such treatment is unwarranted for anyone. She offered me a subtle, grateful nod. Indeed, I persevered. I transformed my existence. I've been navigating life solo for quite a while, and to be truthful, I've simply grown accustomed to it. Eventually, solitude begins to feel like a refuge. I realized that more than I cared to acknowledge. A few minutes later, we arrived at her place. The house was modest and unassuming, yet it exuded a sense of warmth and comfort, as if it had a story to tell. She released her seatbelt, pausing momentarily before her hand moved toward the door handle. Would you like to join me for a little while? She inquired, casting a fleeting look in my direction. I paused. It wasn't in my original intentions, yet the manner in which she posed the question compelled me to think twice. She appeared genuinely engaged rather than merely courteous. Her voice carried a sincerity that suggested she longed for company tonight. Indeed, I replied after a brief pause. Absolutely. Within. Her abode exuded a sense of warmth, adorned with gentle illumination and inviting hues. It was the sort of space that exuded warmth, transcending mere structure to embody the essence of a true home. She slipped off her shoes and motioned for me to follow suit. Settle in, she said, moving toward the kitchen. Would you care for a cup of tea? Absolutely, that sounds lovely. I settled onto her couch, absorbing the subtle nuances of her surroundings. Snapshots of loved ones, volumes arranged with care on a quaint wooden shelf, a cozy blanket resting over the armrest. It was straightforward yet welcoming. She came back with 2 cups of tea, offered me one, and then took her place at the other end of the couch. We engaged in a conversation that meandered through trivialities, touching on life and drifting into the realm of the inconsequential. Yet, as the evening unfolded, an undeniable sense of comfort enveloped the atmosphere. It felt as if we were 2 souls burdened by the weight of the world, finally allowing ourselves to simply be in the present. At one moment, she glanced at me and said, with a hint of uncertainty, "You don't have to go if you don't wish to." I examined her expression, looking for any indication that she had doubts. Yet she appeared unwaveringly confident. I let out a breath, acknowledging with a nod. Understood. And just like that, I remained. Over 2 months had slipped by since that evening. The evening I took Megan back, the evening I lingered, the evening that transformed everything. Reflecting on that moment, it seemed like the true start of an unexpected journey, one that neither of us had actively sought, yet we stumbled upon it regardless. Since then, we had been meeting up often, weaving into each other's lives in a manner that felt natural. It was neither extravagant displays nor heartfelt revelations. The connection was effortless and organic, a bond that required no effort to establish because it existed inherently. Initially, we didn't even discuss what we were to each other. There is a complete absence of conversations regarding the nature of the relationship, no dialogue about its future direction. We relished our time together, sharing evenings at her home, sipping tea, watching classic films that she adored while I feigned indifference, or simply basking in a cozy silence. Occasionally, she would visit my home, and we would prepare dinner side by side, sharing laughter as we navigated through recipes that were unfamiliar to both of us. Yet, we chose to keep it to ourselves, not out of shame or secrecy, but because it seemed too early to reveal, too valuable. If it didn't work out, I wanted to avoid the task of explaining it to my mother or witnessing that unmistakable look of disappointment in her eyes. Megan shared those sentiments. During family dinners, my mother would playfully nudge me about finding a partner, dropping not-so-subtle hints about Megan. We would exchange smiles and knowing looks whenever she turned her back, enjoying the moment together. The allure of secrecy was undeniably exhilarating, yet it was the gift of time that truly captivated us. It's essential to create something genuine, free from the burden of external pressures weighing on us. As we continued to share moments, the truth began to reveal itself more distinctly. I found myself captivated by her charm. I observed it in the subtle details. The way she would scrunch her nose when laughter overtook her. The manner in which she would gently push her hair behind her ear while lost in contemplation. She always had an extra pair of gloves tucked away in her bag, ready for the moments I might forget mine in the chill. I have experienced dating in the past, encountering a variety of relationships, some positive and others not so much. Yet, this was unlike anything else. It was neither a pursuit nor a playful endeavor, nor was it founded on ephemeral desire. It was unwavering, robust. It was precisely the sort of thing I had always assured myself I would identify upon encountering it. And yet it still took me by surprise. One evening, as we lounged on my couch, her head gently resting against my shoulder, I found myself simply observing her. The gentle ebb and flow of her breath. Her fingers wandered, tracing patterns on my arm with a dreamy, absent-minded grace. She seemed to sense my gaze, for she adjusted her position, raising her head to connect with my eyes. "Excuse me?" she inquired, her tone soft, intrigued. I let out a breath, gently tilting my head in disbelief. Silence. Lost in thought. She arched an eyebrow. "Concerning." After a moment of uncertainty, I offered her a faint smile. "How strange life can be." She smiled as well, a gradual, understanding sort of smile. "Indeed." I gave a slight nod. "Consider this for a moment. Not long ago, our acquaintance was minimal. You were merely a friend of my mother's. At this moment. At this moment." Her voice was gentle as she completed the thought for me. "Your presence in my life is simply irreplaceable." I took a deep breath, sensing a gentle heat radiate from my heart. "Have you ever pondered just how wild that is?" I inquired. "The most wonderful surprises often come when you're not looking for them." She whispered it constantly. Indeed, it was true. Had you suggested a year ago that I would find myself in this place, alongside her, I would have found it hard to accept. For years, I believed I needed to embark on a quest for something like this. Pursue it. However, I've come to understand that the most significant aspects of life, those that genuinely count, often arrive unexpectedly. At times, they appear when you're caught off guard.